30 Seconds to Mars is an alternative rock band known for their epic and dramatic musical style. They blend rock with atmospheric elements, orchestration, and Jared Leto's distinctive vocals to create anthemic and emotional songs. And in today's video, I'm going to break down how I reproduce Stuck from their most recent album. It's the end of the world, but it's a beautiful day. So let's jump in. Alright friends, as always, let's have a listen through and then we'll break everything down in detail. Alright, super simple song, so let's start off with the drums. First off, we've got our kick, fall to the floor. Adding Saturn just to crunch it up and add some character. Transient shaper to get rid of some of the sustain so that it feels a lot more punchy and tight. Then we're layering the kick with a snap, and that's just panned a little bit to the left. Doing some EQ to get rid of some of the mids and high mids. So that's just supporting the fall to the floor groove. And then we've got a clap that's also doing the same thing. Clap on its own just sounds like this. A bit roomier and brighter, and then with the kick. So all of this is just supporting the kick. And then we've got another snap doing the same thing again. And then I'm just running it through the American Plexi amp, driving that up a bit. So it's very transient rich, and I just wanted to shave off some of those peaks, and driving that into an amp will help me do that. And I'm using the finger snap from Ting. I use this a lot in this song because there's a lot of kind of Foley elements in this, and this is a great VST for that. And then we've got the offbeat hi-hat that's creating that more kind of dancey feel. So you get this groove. And then to fill out the subdivisions, we've got 3 layers in total, but the main thing driving this is 2 layers. So the first layer is this bottle clink. I got it from Splice, and I'm doing some processing, got some saturation, kickstart to duck the kick and create that groove. A little bit of soothe just to soothe out some of the mids because it was a little bit harsh. Shaving off some of the highs and high mids because it was just a little bit too harsh on my ears. And then I have just pitched it up 5 semitones to match the key of the song and the reference. And then the layer is the same thing with all the same processing, and I'm using this silverware recording. So that's just creating more room, which is exactly what we want. And this is a really great example of putting 2 layers together, well 3 in total, because we have another layer coming in the second part of the chorus. But for this section, it's just 2 layers that are making 1 sound. So it shouldn't sound like there's 2 layers, it should just sound like it's 1. So together. And then without the room, sounds fine. With the roomy part. But together, it's this one unified sound. And then finally, in the second part of the chorus, we've just got this car keys sound, doing the same stuff, saturation, kickstart, all the same parameters. And I'm just panning it a little bit to the right so that it feels like there's a bit more going on in the stereo spectrum. It's adding a little bit more shimmer and room and a little bit more of the attack as well, just to accentuate that. So that's it for the drum sections. So let's just talk about the drum processing overall on the drums group. So I've got a punchy compression setting. So I've got a slow attack, fast release, 4:1 ratio, getting about 3 dB of gain reduction. Adding more punch, and it's just gluing everything together. Then I've just got some warm tape. Then I'm doing a little bit of EQ, rolling off up to 40 Hertz. We don't really need anything below that for the drums. And then I'm just getting rid of 250. There's a bit of build up there. Then decapitator, just fatten everything up, and I'm driving it and I'm doing it in parallel. So it's just under 50%. And then soothe just to catch any of the really harsh high end peaks from all that clinky clanky percussion. All together, it sounds like this. So really simple drum groove, but there's a lot of character there. All right, onto the bass. So we have 3 bass layers overall. Much like the drums, there's a second bass layer that comes in the second part of the chorus just to lift everything a little bit more, add some more energy. So the main bass layer is this. So I'm just using modo bass for this. We want it to sound like a real bass. So we've got it on finger and old age strings, and we're adding all the character with saturation and distortion. Much like a ton of the songs that I break down, there's a real common thread of using all of these tools to add character to an otherwise kind of very simple and sometimes stale sound. So already we're getting closer. And then Faturator, we're adding some drive and fuzz and then just mixing that in. Amazing. And now the second layer is the same thing, same instrument, but I've just changed the bass over because I want a slightly different tone. I don't want them to be conflicting with each other. And I've also put it up an octave. And then we've got the same effects. We've got Decapitator and a little bit of EQ and Faturator, all the same stuff. But what I'm doing here is I'm using micro shift and I'm quite aggressively putting the mix in because we've got our main bass layer and that is covering the center. So we want something that's going to fill out a bit more of the stereo spectrum and push it to the sides. So when I use micro shift, you can just kind of hear it moving around like that. And that's exactly what we want. Whereas it's just dead in the center without it. And then in the second part of the chorus, we've got a guitar layer. I felt very lazy, so I just wanted to use something that's gonna sound great off the bat, which is Electric Sunburst. And then I've just copied that over. I've put that up 2 octaves. So what's really interesting is we're using all of these kind of sounds that would be associated with 30 Seconds to Mars's earlier stuff because, you know, essentially they're a rock band, but they're moving into a more modern electronic sound, but they're still keeping sounds that are in line with kind of what people associate them with, but they're just using them in a different way. The way that they're playing them, the kind of groove that they're creating and that kind of thing is making something slightly different to what we're used to them playing. So we've got Decapitator on there, surprise, surprise, cutting out all of the lows and a little bit of the low mids, Faturator again, and micro shift again, just to push that to the sides as well. And I've just changed the style over a little bit so that there's a little bit more differentiation. So it sounds okay, but it's not where it is in terms of the reference. So we really need to do some group processing. So first off, I'm just adding kickstart to create a little bit more rhythm. This isn't the kind of EDM vibe where it's completely ducking aggressively like, you know, a slap house track or something like that. But I just wanted a little bit of groove going, a little bit of pumping, and it's more so for that than for it to duck the kick. I'm using a different tool for that later on that I'll show in a second. And now we're EQing it, just getting rid of some of around 200 and accentuating some 1K. This is the main element musically in this part of the song. So we really want to do everything we can to make sure that it's covering as much of the sonic energy and frequency spectrum as possible because it's a very sparse track. So that's why there's a lot of saturation and distortion that's adding harmonics, and I'm using EQ to kind of fill everything out a little bit more as well. So here we are, a little bit more saturation, and then I'm using a transient shaper to add a little bit of attack and get rid of a ton of sustain so it feels very tight. Then more Decapitator, 100%, and just under 5 drive. And here's where I'm doing some creative side chaining. So I'm just side chaining it to the kick. You've seen me do this a ton of times if you've seen my videos. I am going to mid side, rolling it off to just under 150 hertz. So I'm essentially telling the bass frequencies to duck the frequencies that the kick is putting out every time it hits. So you can see there, that's the kick. The kick's not playing, but... So the reason I do this is rather than having sidechain compression, which is essentially just pushing the volume of the bass down, what I want to do is just get more definition around the kick frequencies itself. So I'm just doing that to get a little bit more clarity and definition and punch from the kick, so we can really hear it as it's a driving factor in the song. But I don't want to bring the volume of it up, and I don't want the volume of the bass to dip down too much. So it's just a really nice transparent tool to do that. So that's it for the bass. The bass sounds like this with all the group processing. Alrighty, so there's only a few more elements and then we'll move on to the vocals. So we've got a pad that drones in the second part of the chorus just to lift everything up a little bit. So it sounded quite distorted, so I wanted to find something similar. So I'm just using this Autumn pad from Analog Labs. Love it, great stuff. I could hear a little bit of like E. There was a slight difference in terms of kind of, if I was listening to it in terms of vowels, there was a bit more E, and I know that 4K is associated with the vowel E. There's a whole video that I'll put down in the description below which breaks down how certain frequency ranges and frequencies are associated with different vowels, and you can learn to associate those vowels with those frequencies. It's a way for you to really quickly identify frequencies and that kind of thing. And then we've got some decapitator on there, surprise, surprise, a bit more distortion and grit. And then we're doing some very aggressive side chaining for the pumping to get that rhythm. And now we've just got a couple of effects. So we've got this cymbal reverse riser from Splice, just creating some tension in this little drop here. And then we've just got these little vocal chops that come in. So it's just me singing. And I've just done a little bit of time shortening, like so, just to make it sound a little bit more chopped up because I've sang it. And in the reference, they've really chopped up Jared Leto's vocals. We've got it pitched up a octave, and the formant is also coming up a little bit to get that chipmunky sound, adding some drive. Sounds like this. And then I'm doing another instance of Little Altar Boy, and I'm just bringing up the octave again, and I'm doubling it. So rather than it being up the octave 100%, it's like 50%. So something like this. So you can hear this faint octave above, just supporting it. Then Faturator, adding some more grit, a little bit of Valhalla, very short decay, just a little bit of space, and then micro shift. Very subtle. So these just coming throughout the chorus. And then finally, let's move on to the vocals. So we've got this stuck stab. I'm really harnessing the inner Jared Leto within. Stuck. And then we're layering that with the same octave. So I've just recorded that twice, but I am using sample delay to move that to the sides. Stuck. So it fills it out, makes it feel thicker. Then I'm singing the octave above twice, and then just panning those hard left and right. Stuck. And here's where it gets really fun. So the vocals just sound like this. Stuck. Sounds fine, but nothing, you know, crazy, nothing with a lot of impact and grit. Here's the real wall of sound kind of effect that comes in. So I've sung the octave above again. Sounds like this on its own. Stuck. And I'm adding a ton of heavy saturation, so it sounds aggressive. Stuck. Love it. And here's the really cool thing. So we've got a crazy reverb, really long decay, 50% wet. I've just done a little bit of EQ. It just goes on forever. Could make a whole drone, you know. But we're not doing that here. So I've bounced it in place. Now it's printed with the reverb and the distortion and all of that stuff. And I've just chopped off the long decay. It's like a modern kind of way of gating. Just cut it off. So it swells up and then it just cuts off. And in the context of the vocals, you get this. So it's like this really aggressive, big sounding vocal that just comes in and drops off. So you can't even really hear the reverb, but there's just a ton happening and then just cutting off, because we associate kind of the long decay with reverb. So that is it, my friends. It's a very, very simple song. Drums, bass, a pad, and then the vocals. So It just goes to show you how effective you can be if you're just very intentionally layering stuff, making things sound full, using distortion and saturation, filling out the frequency spectrum with those tools, and also just making stuff sound as big as possible and maximizing on those minimal elements. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you want to see how I reproduce Speed Drive by Charli XCX, click the video right here. And until next time, create courageously.